Okay, and if you heard a dog barking in the background, that's mine. I hope that she doesn't interrupt a lot. She may bark a couple of times. Okay, I'm going to put a link here in the chat. This is a folder that has a couple of docs in it that I'll be going over today. So then you can look at that anytime. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Common App itself. If you're not familiar with it, it is a single place you can go to apply for multiple schools. And I think it has about 900 schools, I think, is the number I saw last that use it. So I think most of the schools that you'll be applying to in the United States would use the Common App. There are some that have their own applications. So for example, University of California has its own application system, but most other schools use the Common App. All right. The Common App website is just commonapp.org. You can see down here what kinds of things you'll need to have in the app. So a high school transcript. And this is the kind of thing that you can coordinate with your counselors at school about. They'll probably give you some information ahead of time to say, this is how you get a transcript for the Common App. Here we've got, list of activities, work, and family responsibilities. Test scores. And then some personal information, family information, and then, your honors and achievements. And then, of course, there's the essay. So these are the kinds of things that you can start gathering. And there's this link here in the doc will take you to that page. So the preparing for the Common App essay really begins much earlier. Throughout your school career, K-12, you want to be doing the kinds of things that will give you experiences that will give you something to write about. So joining clubs, volunteering, say for community service, or at some other institutions like here in Rochester, we have a clinic. Take some kind of leadership role, like maybe try to become a club president or something, or a student body position. You're basically gaining experiences that will give you things to work with when you are doing the app essay. Not that any of those things will necessarily be what you talk about. We'll get into topics more later, but kids who are younger, this is something that they can be thinking about. And then I suggest keep a running list of your accomplishments and experiences so that you're not scrambling by the time it's application time and you're trying to remember all the things that you've done. So I just keep a list of achievements and experiences that you can use to put in your app and possibly use for the essay. Okay, in the summer before your senior year, this is the time to gather information. and to start your essays. Now, the reason I don't say necessarily starting your essay, say in your junior year, you certainly can, but the more experiences that you've accumulated before you start the essay, the better you'll have things to work with. So you may have some earlier experiences that you can draw on. You may have something happening in your sophomore, junior year that will be a good thing. So I don't think there's a need to start really early, unless you just want to practice that kind of essay. So the Common App registration opens on August 1st, and then you can create an account and start entering information. And then in November, usually either the 1st or the 15th, you'll start getting deadlines for early decision and early action. Now, different schools may have slightly different terms for those things, but basically, early decision is a binding thing. So you can only apply to one school with early decision. And then if you get accepted, you have to go there. Or you can do early action, which is not binding, but it's still an earlier application time. So you don't have to pick that school, but you can find out earlier. Some schools also have rolling applications, so they may have several deadlines throughout the year. And then, of course, there's the regular application deadlines, and those are start in January. You may have around January 1st or 15th, and then you may have some that are later. So that gives you an idea of things to shoot for, when to shoot for getting things done. So in the Common App, you'll have the main essay, and then you will have supplemental essays for different schools. So they'll tell you, they'll have you fill out information about, why you're interested in that school or some other types of questions. Some of those will probably overlap. So once you complete a supplemental essay for one school, you might be able easily to adapt it to another school. But we're going to focus on just the main essay here. So let's take a look at the prompts. These can change a bit from year to year. What I've found so far is they may change one or two. Sometimes they don't change any at all. But they're really all pretty similar. So in this prompt, you have, a background or identity or interest that is really critical for understanding who you are as a person. The second one is about facing obstacles, or even failure. And how did you overcome that obstacle, or what did you learn about that from that failure? Time that you challenged a belief or an idea. Something that someone did for you that made you thankful. How did that motivate you? Discussing an accomplishment that sparked some kind of growth or new understanding. A topic that's extremely interesting to you. And this can be a great opportunity to focus on something related to your major. And one of the questions I got ahead of time was, should you focus on something that's specifically related to your major? And I think the answer is, if you have a couple of different options that really look good, and one of them relates to the major, then yes. But otherwise, just focus on what you think is the most powerful experience. Or an essay on any topic. I've never encouraged anyone to do this particular one. You may have something very, some kind of incredible essay that you've already written, but typically you want to focus on you. So if this kind of essay really reveals something about you personally, then yes, but otherwise I would stick with one of the others. Now they may sound pretty different, but they all get at one thing, and that is, what is a desirable quality, characteristic that you have that would make you a good student at that school? Now, a good student from their point of view is not just someone who succeeds, but someone who has something to contribute. So that's the kind of thing they're looking for, and it's going to be tied to some kind of experience that you've had. Now, it doesn't mean it's a one-time experience. It could be something that happened over a period of time, but it's some kind of thing that happened to you that reveals something about you, a trait that would be beneficial for the school. So that is the essence of this essay. Word limit right now is 650 words. It's doable. Sometimes you may have to cut, but even if you start out at 750, 800, or even more, you can find ways to cut it down. So that's not usually an issue, I don't think. All right. I do recommend some books here. I like, there's an author named Janine Robinson. I like her approach, and that's the one that I use with students. So this book, Escape Essay Hell, takes you through the process. It's a very short book, and it just gives you the basics of what you need to know. She has another book, Heavenly Essays, with 50 examples of successful essays where people got into their school. And each essay, it says at the beginning where this person got in using that essay. So these are examples of essays that use her process. So I really recommend getting both. Now, there are other authors out there with good books. So if you already know of someone who has a particularly good book that you like, then great. But otherwise, this is certainly one that I think you can use very successfully. Now, I also recommend, if you struggle with writing style, with good writing style, or if you want to improve in that area, I've got a couple of books I recommend here. This one is the classic, The Elements of Style, originally by William Strunk, and then later E.B. White edited it and updated it. It's a short, simple book, but it has some really good tips on writing well. And then another book, this one's a little more advanced, it's a little more involved, but the Writer's Coach by Jack Hart. This one is, I really like this book. Now, some of it is about journalistic writing. Some of the things are just about newspaper articles or whatever. You can ignore that, but the stuff on style is really good for any writing, and he has lots of good examples. So I highly recommend this book. Although Middle schoolers might have a tough time with this book, but certainly high schoolers should get a lot out of it. All right, so what kind of qualities do colleges want? So we're looking at this from the point of view of the college. How are you going to benefit from the college? So talking about how much you're going to learn there isn't by itself what is going to get you in. Assume that the competitive schools will all have students who qualify and would succeed. So it's not just going to be your grades. How can you show something about who you are that will say, oh, this person will really make a great contribution on campus? Leadership qualities. Do you take initiative? Right? Are you successful in making things happen? Uniqueness. Is there something about you that's different? Your passion for your desired major. But if you do this, you should have some other kind of quality mixed in with that. Are you persistent? Are you determined? Do you take advantage of opportunities? That kind of thing. Persistence or determination. Do you overcome challenges? Do you work hard? And then service. Do you do things for others? Do you contribute to the community? So those are, broadly speaking, those are the kinds of traits that you can focus on. Okay, so in the Escape from SA Hell book, she has you go through and list qualities that you might have that would work, and kind of expand on that previous list. She does mention persistence, problem-solving skills, kindness, caring, empathy, a balanced approach to things in your life, ingenuity, creativity, maturity, being positive, being self-controlled, passion for doing something with excellence. So there are a lot of things that are related to the ones I listed, and you can take a look on that list and see, if you get the book, you can see a bigger list. All right, now then you have to look at the personal experiences. They don't have to be big. You don't have to win an international championship or something to have a big experience. And I have a link here to an article written by an admissions person. And so you can see her example of the best essay that she's ever seen. But here are some examples, and these are examples from that Heavenly Essays book. So, things that you're involved in, hobbies, extracurriculars. For example, there was an essay, he was applying for an engineering program, and he was really into tying knots. And he talked about an experience where he got caught up in a tree with knots with a knot that a new knot that was very complicated that he had tried. So kind of a, well, I can't say down to earth experience, but not something huge. Or a guy who liked to recycle old stuff, and he talked about getting this old trampoline to his house. Someone talks about being a master griller, or someone learning how to make cheesecake. She was not a natural cook, and she went through a long process and finally, learned a lot how to do this and perfected it. Someone even talked about his TV watching habits, what he's learned from that. There are occasional sports ones. You have to be careful about sports because it can sound cliche. It can sound like, you've done this. They've gotten 100 essays on this, so you want to be careful about that. But there is occasionally one that works for sports. This one for crew, it was about her determination and working really hard. I had one student who was a swimmer, but he had to overcome asthma, and it was a major accomplishment what he did. So there are sometimes you can do sports. Could be a job. Now there can be difficulties that you talk about. Now the parent with cancer or something, that can be cliche or it can work. It really just depends on how unique is your insight from it. Could be physical things, like there's one about someone who has a genetic condition in her family. They all have wide hips, and she talks about what that's like. So or you have someone who is constantly cold. So it just kind of these little things that reveal something about who you are. I have some links in here about cliches, things to avoid, that you can read anytime. And also some examples of essays that succeed in certain areas. So you want to be relatable. You want the admissions people to feel like they kind of know something, they kind of know you in some way. Although you don't want to be too personal. If you committed a crime, don't say anything about that. All right. You come up with the qualities that you have. You come up with your experiences, your major experiences, and then you find out how those might match. So you might even start by looking at your most powerful experiences and deciding what you could talk about with those. All right. So you've got your main ideas. Now, how do you do an essay? So I'm going to go over to an essay that I did with a student. This doc is also in that folder. Notice that he did put a title. You can put a title. There's that can be a good thing. It's not required though. All right. Now the way that this goes in Janine Robinson's approach is to start with some kind of climactic moment, a time when you were faced with a decision or something that you had to respond to. So here, in his case, I was walking home from the bus stop one spring afternoon in my junior year and decided to grab the mail. Inside the mailbox was a small package from the College Board, and knowing exactly what it was, I eagerly tore it open. I was shocked. My SAT score from December was not at all what I expected. Now, of course, he leaves you hanging. He doesn't tell you what his score was. Now, after that, after you introduce that important moment that is unresolved, then you go back and you give the background information leading up to that point. So here, I had studied little for the test. Like my parents, I saw my PSAT score as a good indicator of success on the SAT. So my preparation included just reading through some strategies and taking 2 practice tests. I knew the question types and the right pacing for each question. On the day of the test, I felt confident about my answers all the way through. I was happy and relieved when I returned home. Now it was only a matter of waiting for the wonderful news. You can probably tell where this is going. All right, so we've gone back to the time when this whole situation got started. We're up to the present moment now. And then he explains what happened. But I was wrong. My scores had dropped compared to my performance on the PSAT. I was disappointed in myself because I had believed my strong skills in math problem solving, reading comprehension, and memory could pull me through. Notice that even though he's admitting a mistake, he's not saying that he doesn't have any good qualities. He mentioned some here. I was also embarrassed to show my parents, who had expected me to earn at least a 2100 based on the PSAT. This was at a time when the SAT was 2400 points instead of 1600. Okay, so we find out he didn't do well. Now, after you go back to the moment of decision, you're going to say what you did and what were the results. So this is an essay about dealing with failure, right? Which was, if you remember that, as one of the prompts. So you fail, what do you learn from it? Well, you demonstrate what you learn from it by saying, here's something I did, and this was the result. You know, those, when people go on a diet and they post a before and after picture. Here I was when I was way overweight. Here's how I am now. This is the kind of thing we're talking about. Or maybe it's your house, like you're remodeling it. You put the before picture, the after picture. All right. There was little time to study for the new format of the SAT just around the corner, but I had more time to prepare for the ACT. However, my mother told me that with the small amount of effort I had put into the SAT, she would be surprised if I earned anything higher than a 26. I needed to study hard for the ACT. I also needed to improve my GPA. I used to take my homework less seriously since I was getting consistently good test scores. My grades were suffering as a result. The SAT experience made me realize I needed to take homework more seriously to improve my learning in general, boost my GPA, and increase my chance of admission to a better school. Therefore, I focused more on homework and started to study for the ACT 3 months before. Okay, so he recognized this is what I need to do. Now he's talking about his specific strategy. Started to study for the ACT 3 months before the test date, spending more than 300 hours reading about the question types and time management strategies for each section. I took 7 practice tests, wrote many practice essays, and made sure I understand everything thoroughly for the test in February. Okay, so these are the concrete actions that he took. All right, what was the result? One May evening, an email came from ACT with a link to the results. I was ecstatic when I found out that I had scored a 30. With my new focus on homework, my GPA was soaring. I also started to earn consistently higher test results when I studied like I had for the ACT. For example, I applied this new approach to my preparation for the AP macroeconomics and human geography tests and scored a 5 on both. Now that I have learned to plan better, I am prepared to take this new habit with me on my next adventure, college. Now, one of the things about this, aside from the fact that he demonstrates his success by getting a higher score than was originally expected, but he also showed that he took that beyond as a habit, applied it to other things in his life as well. So we can see that it wasn't just a one-time thing. So this is his after picture. All right, and you can see in the next here, I break this down into the major sections. So he failed, but he learned from it, and he developed a new way of handling homework and school preparation, things like that in general, and demonstrated a change. Now, that's only for the failure kind. It could be that, you talk about a success that isn't based on overcoming a failure, but you're going to talk about what was the moment where you had a choice about what to do. You go into the background, lead up to that point, and then you explain what you did, what was the result. And then, if possible, how have you used that in the future? Just briefly at the end. So that's the basic format. Now, in the process of writing the essay, you have listed your characteristics, you've listed your experiences, you've decided which ones you're going to use. Make an outline from there based on this outline, and then you write your draft. Just generally speaking, for writing a draft, don't worry about the word limit or your style or the grammar, just get your ideas down. It's much smoother if you're not focused on each sentence when you're just getting your main ideas down. All right, general strategies for revising. I always go from the biggest changes to the smallest. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to worry about, let's say, punctuation at the very beginning, because I might change whole paragraphs. I might get rid of a lot of sentences and put new ones in, and then I have to redo that. So you make the biggest changes so that you're not redoing the little ones. So make your biggest changes first. Now, start with your basic content and organization. Does the quality that you are trying to emphasize come through clearly? Have you made your experience clear, and is it real to people? Have you used descriptive language that appeals to the imagination? I mean, this is a kind of a cross between a story and an essay. So you want people to be able to imagine what you experienced. Is everything in your essay, in your draft, relevant? Are there things that you talk about that don't help support your point? Does it flow smoothly? Is everything in the right order? And then, you want to check at that point when you've made your major changes. Are you within the word limit? Are you a lot over? Do you have room maybe to add more? Maybe you could get more detail about your accomplishment. So you can check on that. However, if you end up over the limit, even like, let's say you're over the limit by 100 words, you can usually cut things without cutting any content, just write it more efficiently. If it's 1,000 words and its limit is 650, then you'll need to look at, oh, I've gone into too much detail about something, I need to cut some details out. Okay, style. Major things about style. Unfortunately, style, that's a whole other topic that I can't get into really deeply, but I'll just mention some things that I think are really important for basic style. Efficiency, cutting out words that don't add anything. Variety, not using the same words a lot and having different sentence structures. Energy, using descriptive language, using action words instead of words that say something is something. And then the level of formality, and I would say this is not an academic essay, so you don't have to have that strict formality. So be conversational, but don't be too slangy. I mean, it's not like you're texting one of your friends at school. So conversational, but still.
The conversation with your school.
I think someone is unmuted. I'm going to check if you're muted. Okay. One example is don't refer to everyone as you, right? When you say, this is what you do in this kind of situation, right? You're meaning people in general. So that's an example of something that's really informal that I would avoid. But contractions, I'm, your, those are probably okay most of the time. All right, so after you've done content and organization, after you've cut words you don't need, make sure there's variety, put energy into your language, and all advice, specific advice about all that can be found in those style books I recommended that are at the top of the doc. And then, of course, after that, you want to make sure that your grammar is really good. You don't have run-on sentences and all that stuff. There is one more resource that I'll point you to. And there's just a lot of language and writing related things that style of, writing style, grammar. The online writing lab at Purdue. This is an excellent resource on a lot of things. And I send people to this all the time. And they've got things, anything related to writing, even down to APA and MLA formatting. But it's great for grammar and things like that. And one final thing, get multiple people to look at your essay. People who know you and people who are good at writing. They can, they can help you with the style, they can help you with clarity, and give you a perspective that you don't have, and then they can help you with things like grammar. So get several people to look at it, even a couple of your friends at school can look at it and give you some advice. But your parents, maybe a teacher, other adults, who can give you some good suggestions. All right, so that is all the main stuff, and we can go ahead and throw out some questions, and I'll answer them as best I can.
Do you need them type something in the chat? Because I disabled the chat.
Yeah, I think, why don't you go ahead and open it up and then.
Sure. Yeah, I have the chat open.
Okay.
Maybe you want to repeat the question again?
Did someone say a question? I didn't hear.
No, I said you want to repeat. What do you want them to type in the chat?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the chat is open now. If you have any questions about what we covered, or the application process, or the writing the essay, just go ahead and type it in the chat. Okay, got a question about if I recommend student read a lot of example essays before they start writing. Yes, I think that's very helpful. One of the books I recommended, let's see, this one has 50 essays that are good examples, and I'm sure that you can find others online. You can even check the admissions for the school you're applying to. Okay, then the follow-up question to that: will it make the student's essay not original? Well, that's always a question with any kind of creative thing. There may be some major things that will overlap, but each person is individual. So you may have someone who says some similar things to you, but it will be your own life that's the context. Certainly, you should not borrow specific sentences or phrases from another essay, but you can also learn from how other people have done it successfully. And broadly speaking, you can adopt those principles. So I guess it's possible for it not to end up being original, but I don't think it's, I think it's pretty easy to avoid. Okay. Out of any of the prompts, do I consider any of them easier? I actually don't think you even have to think about in terms of the prompts, because they all kind of get at the same thing, and then you'll find a prompt that fits. I do think that number 5 here, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. I would think that a lot of them would fall into this category. And certainly this is one that I would spend time thinking about, or this is going to be a natural one. It's going to be either this or one which is about something about your background, and then overcoming obstacles. I think those are going to be the 3 most common ones. But I wouldn't even think in terms of of a specific prompt. You'll have to, you'll say in the app which prompt you're responding to, but anything you write that fits what we've talked about is going to fit one of those. Okay, any red flags to avoid? I didn't go into a lot of depth about this one. There are a few articles that I linked to here where I talk, here about cliches and other things to avoid. So most topics are doable in some way, but there are some that would sound pretty cliche. So I think you need to make sure that it really says something specific about you. So yes, generic accomplishments. It's not that you're going to have accomplishments necessarily that no one has ever had anything similar to, right? I mean, for example, the sports thing. It can be cliche to do a sports one, or it can work. It just depends. There are a couple of examples of in the essay book, the Heavenly Essays book, of ones that work. Okay, question about prompt 5. Does it have to be one particular event or accomplishment? It could be a set of related things, but the general idea is that it's better to go deeper about one thing than it is to cover several shallow things. So you might have a set of related things that happened, but they should be closely connected for you to include multiple ones. Okay, another one here. Okay, someone's asking about writing academic achievements. What if the student's passion is math? Well, if it's just, I did well in math in school, that's not going to be enough. It's not even going to be enough to say I did well in a math competition. It's got to be, maybe it could be about the lengths you went to succeed in competition, and how you learned, how you grew as a person from that, or what does that trait show about you. So it can be an academic related thing, but it needs to be something personal. It can't just be, I got good grades. So also remember that you will be listing achievements in your application. So the essay is not your only chance to write down important things that have happened. It's just a chance for something more that would benefit from more detailed explanation. Okay, what would count as a significant challenge? Is it okay to write about frequent moving and changing schools? I think a significant challenge can be anything that demonstrates that you had to do something significant to overcome it. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be a major thing that completely changed your life. It can be a small thing. It just needs to be concrete and show I had this challenge. I did this to overcome it. I was successful. This says something about me. So that is how I would determine whether it's significant enough. As for frequent moving and changing schools, that could be a great example. So if you can, the question is, do you have a concrete way of talking about it? Can you be specific? Can you nail down something that's easy to demonstrate? Okay. Would you recommend writing one of the cliches if you think that you can frame it very uniquely? I would say what's really cliche about it is the fact that there's not a unique message rather than the topic itself. It's just that some topics are easier to be cliche about than others. So sports is an example where it's easier not to say something unique about it, but that doesn't mean that it's a completely untouchable subject. If it's what really stands out to you, then see how you can use it to say something about yourself that's unique. Should student avoid politics and religion? I wouldn't want to say never write about politics or religion, but if it's something controversial, then you have to be really careful. But if, for example, you talk about being involved in Model UN and learning something from that experience, or that experience taught you something very powerful, and you're not necessarily talking about your personal beliefs about that political issue. Religion, that's a tough one. Again, if for example, you learned how to see a lesson of learning how to get along with people of other religions or something, that's one thing. But if you're focused, if you're like, let's say that you're applying to schools in California and you have a really conservative religious point of view, it's probably not, you'd have to be really careful how you talk about that, because you're going to have some admissions people who have strong personal feelings about it, and that might affect their judgment. So I would stay away from controversial stuff as much as possible. But there may be something about politics or religion that's not focused on the controversial issue itself. Is it okay to write about mental health? Yes, I think so. Now, this is one of those cases where you want to be careful not to give really seriously personal information, but like struggling with depression, that could be a good topic. But if there might be other things that are too much, too personal. As someone, as one of these articles that I linked to says, you don't want to just put out your dirty laundry for people to see. Like, for example, if you say, I used to do drugs, that's, I would avoid that unless it's something that you have a record and you want to talk about, that they're going to see anyway, and you want to address it. But otherwise, yeah, I would just make sure it's not too extreme. You said mental health or ed or ED. I'm not sure what that second part is. So if you want to put another comment down there, I can clarify what you mean by that. I can address that. All right. Controversial political views. I think I pretty much addressed that. You don't want to trigger a personal reaction in the admissions people. You're going to have people who have very strong political views. And this is especially the case if you're a conservative, because most schools are liberal and will feel, many people will feel strongly about that. What are the things to do to lessen the chances of realizing that nothing special has happened throughout your life and end up with a really cliche essay? I think don't discount the smaller things. Like there was one example of that I mentioned, the guy who likes to tie knots, and he learned this really complicated knot, got stuck in a tree because he couldn't undo it. Or a guy who is really tall and really big, has a really big build, and he tends to intimidate people. So he talks about how he is very extra gentle with people when he talks to them, so they're not intimidated by him. So it has to be you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be big. So you just got to think through things that have happened in your life that are significant to you, even if someone else would look at them without any explanation and say, well, I don't see why that's a big deal. It's how you explain it that makes it important. Also, if you're earlier in your education and you realize that maybe you need some more significant experiences, then you need to get involved and do stuff so that you have more to work with, if it's early enough that you have that kind of time. Oh, ED was eating disorder. I would say it might depend on the severity and where you're at with it. I think I haven't run into this topic, and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on what the reaction would be. But I think it's extremely common. And so for that reason alone, it might be fine. I think you just have to judge it on what you're going to say about it. And you might also just look up if there's any advice about that specific topic to see if people say this is a no-no, or yeah, it's been done before. It's common in high school and it's common in college, I think. So that alone makes me think that it's probably could be a good topic. Could writing with both hands be a talent for the first essay? Depends on what you have to say about it. What's the significance of it? What does it say about you? Is there a larger lesson from it? Does it point to something deeper? Or how has it affected your life? Has it affected it in a significant way? That's how I would evaluate that one. Okay, any questions that, maybe any follow-up questions that you have, things I didn't answer clearly? or anything else you just thought of? Okay, could you write about watching someone else experience something, like close friends, family member died? Yes. Now, the dying relative thing is something that you have to be careful not to be cliche about. But it is a doable topic. And it doesn't have to be your immediate relative. It could be somebody else. In fact, it could be the death of a famous person, I think. Even as long as you can show how it's meaningful in a concrete way. And that book, I think it covers and has one or two essays about someone like someone's father had cancer or his relative died. There may be a couple of examples of that in there, so you can look and see how that person did it. But yes, it could be a cliche. Just depends on what you can say about it. Anything else? Okay, well, if you do think of something later that you want to ask me, most of you probably have my email address already, but I will put it in the chat. And I think that we can stop there. So thank you much, everybody, for listening and asking questions. And I hope this helps. Thanks a lot.